Hey, this is Mrs. Reichelt, and we're continuing with our tissue notes. Make sure that you're still using your tissues handout. It'll make writing your notes a lot easier, and I think you'll be able to organize them in your head a little bit better. So we're starting off with connective tissue. You'll notice that we're going a little bit out of order from what the assignment says. We go from epithelium, which is the one we did first. We're skipping muscle for now, and we're going over to connective. The reason we're doing that is just there was more space for me to separate things out. So we are in connective tissue. Remember, you don't have to write that down, so make sure you find that tissue type. In the locations, go ahead that it's found everywhere. So everywhere in the body. In addition, under location, it's going to be the most abundant and widely distributed type of tissue. In the location section, that's what you're going to put. So right up there. Then in the function section, this will bind body tissues together, support the body, and provide protection. Okay, so now we should be in the characteristic section. So some characteristics is that connective tissue is extremely varied in blood supply. So that means that some tissues have a large blood supply and some tissues are highly avascular. So they vary. Some are vascularized, some are avascular. In addition, there's an extracellular matrix. So an extracellular matrix is a non-living material that surrounds living cells. And we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail right here. So, if you wrote in the characteristics, so you have the characteristics column, basically, we talked about extracellular matrix. You don't need to write that there are two main elements. Ground substance is the first. Ground substance is H2O, polysaccharides, and proteins. Part 2 are the fibers. Okay, fibers are going to be, and let's just cross that out. The fibers are going to be collagen, which are white fibers, elastic, which are yellow, and then reticular fibers. So that all should be under the characteristics column. Good news for you, go ahead and cross out the classification section for the connective tissue. They are not classified in the same way as the epithelial tissue. So go ahead and cross that part out. And we are going to go straight to our examples. So, bone tissue or osseous tissue. Let's see. Bone cells in lacunae cavities have a hard matrix, calcium salts, and they have a large number of collagen fibers. Bone tissue is used to protect and support the body. Bone tissue is very easy to identify, especially under a microscope, because it looks like this. To me, it looks like if you were to cut down a tree, you see all of these little rings. Bone tissue is just like that. So hopefully you'll be able to identify that pretty easily. It looks like if you cut down a tree and you were to look at the stump of the tree, that's kind of what osseous tissue looks like. The next up is hyaline cartilage. Hyaline cartilage is the most common type of cartilage. It's abundant in collagen. The locations are the larynx and the entire fetal skeleton. Obviously prior to birth, because that means that's fetal. So the fetal skeleton and then the larynx, and it's very abundant. And here is what hyaline cartilage looks like. So you can see each of these cells makes up that hyaline cartilage. Okay, moving right along here. Elastic cartilage. I don't think you have to write a whole lot down about elastic cartilage. It provides elasticity. Imagine that. It is in the name. An example is the external ear. Then let's move right along to fibrocartilage. Fibrocartilage is highly compressible, and it's going to form the cushion-like discs between the vertebrae. Okay, so here is some diagrams here. Okay, so our fibrocartilage is going to be this diagram. It sort of looks just like this, and when we go to identify these, they look just like this. So you just have to remember that fibrocartilage is very compressible, provides for cushion-like discs in the vertebrae, and they're pictured right here. All right. Next up, we have the dense connective tissue. Dense connective tissue is also known as the dense fibrous tissue. So if you see those you can use them interchangeably. The main matrix element is going to be collagen. Fibroblasts are the cells that make up the fibers. And dense connective tissue are located in tendons, ligaments, and the dermis. Okay, so tendons, let's talk about those really quick first. Tendons are going to attach muscle to bone. Don't worry about writing skeletal muscle. Most muscle we're going to talk about is going to be skeletal, not all of it, but tendons, muscle to bone. Ligaments is going to be bone to bone. And then dermis is the lower layer of the skin. So the epidermis is first, and then you have the dermis after that. So dense connective tissue is going to be in the dermal layer. The epidermis is going to be that epithelial tissue that we talked about in the last podcast. Okay, so here is a picture of dense fibrous connective tissue. All right, moving right on to loose connective tissue types. Okay, so loose connective tissue types is already there. Here is the first loose connective tissue type. So it's labeled, I guess, A, if I'm looking at my notes. So you have the areolar tissue. This is the most widely distributed connective tissue. I would probably write, looks like cobwebs, looks like packing tissue, contains all fiber types, can soak up excess fluid. That's edema. Okay, and this one looks just like this. So when you see a diagram that looks like cobwebs, hopefully you'll be able to match that with the areolar tissue. Our second type of loose connective tissue is adipose tissue. Adipose tissue is going to be fat, okay? Fat globules, okay? Large lipid deposits. The function of fat is for insulation, protection, fuel storage. Okay, you don't have to write down everything, just make sure you get the top things. So adipose is fat, large lipid deposits, insulation, protection, fuel storage. Adipose tissue is also pretty easy to identify as well. Okay, so you'll see all of these fat deposits. Okay, all of those are going to be adipose tissue. Reticular connective tissue. Well, I think I labeled the last one 2 and it should have been B. So C, reticular connective tissue. So this is a delicate network of interwoven fibers. It'll form a stroma of lymphoid organs, so lymph nodes, spleen, and bone marrow is where you find these. And this is what this looks like. So the reticular connective tissue looks just like this. And you'll see several pictures that look just like it in your labs. Alright, and the last one here, the last connective tissue type, is blood. Blood is obviously very vascular. Okay, it's always hopefully it's always oxygenated. Blood cells are surrounded by a fluid matrix called the plasma. Fibers are visible during clotting, and there's a whole chapter all about blood, so we're not going to talk too much about it right now. And functions as a transport vehicle for materials. Those materials are things such as oxygen, carbon dioxide, nutrients, sugar, salt, any of those kinds of things. All of those are going to be transported. Waste, anything like that. So that wraps up connective tissue. Tune in to the next video and we will cover the muscles and the nervous tissue.